Hello, friends, and welcome to This Week at Little Hills. We have worship coming up in just a short time, our Sunday worship service at 5:30 p.m. I hope you'll join us for that. But before we get to that, let's talk about the Psalms, this week's song for our temple. We're turning to Psalms 138, 139, and 140 this week. We're almost at the end. Let's take a look what we have here. The first psalm, the psalm we'll look at today and tomorrow, is the Psalm of David. And we read as it opens, I give thanks, O Lord, with my whole heart. Before the gods I sing your praise. I bow down towards your holy temple and give thanks to your name for your steadfast love and your faithfulness. For you have exalted above all things your name and your word. David is swept up in the joy of who it is that God is. And he can say later on that though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life, because he knows who God is. He knows how wonderful God is. He knows how faithful God is. As we face whatever we're facing today and every day, we need to keep in mind that God is faithful. We're going to be talking about that more tonight, so I do hope you can join us at 5:30 p.m. online or in person for Sunday worship. Psalm 139 that we'll look at on Wednesday and following is also a Psalm of David. And David writes this to open. He says, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. And he goes on talking about how God has always known him and always been with him. Before he was even born, that God knew who he was. And as he says that, then he can call out. He's being opposed by people, we learn here. People who oppose God as well in verses 19 and following. And he can say, God, would you please recognize this wickedness and address it? Why does he say that? As one who's known by God, he knows that he's imperfect, and yet he knows he is loved by God. And he knows that God has a relationship with him, that there's a connection there, and yet there's these other people who want nothing to do with the Lord, who oppose the work of God. And he says, God, I know who you are, and you've known me for all this time. Correct this injustice, this horrid situation where people oppose you. And so it is at the end of the psalm, he can say, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. He can say, God, look at what's wrong with me as well. And not because he thinks he's perfect in contrast to these people, but rather because he desires a relationship with the Lord. He can say, God, in those times that I'm out of accord with you, I want you to correct me and draw me closer to you. And that gives us a model of how we address the world. Yes, we call on God to correct the wrong and change things so that those who oppose him no longer oppose him. And yet we also come humbly before God and ask him to correct us in our wrong. That's what we find in Psalm 139 that we're looking at on Wednesday. Finally, Psalm 140 is also a Psalm of David. We'll look at this starting on Friday, and it's a cry out for deliverance. Notice what David says, deliver me, O Lord, from evil men, preserve me from violent men who plan evil things in their heart. He later on in verse 6 says, I say to the Lord, you are my God, give ear to my voice, for my pleas for mercy, O Lord. O Lord, my Lord, the strength of my salvation, you have covered my head in the day of battle. He's facing evil and opposition, yet he knows that God is with him and protecting him. He says in verse 12, I know that the Lord will maintain the cause of the afflicted and will execute justice for the needy. It goes back to what he knows and is known throughout these three Psalms, which is that God is faithful and God is just. We don't have to wait to see the result and see God make everything right to know that, because we already see in how God has worked in history and in our lives that he is faithful and he is just, and he will be faithful and just for you as well. And yet God's justice, thankfully, is a justice wrapped in mercy, that when we deserve justice that casts us away from God, instead he brings us closer to him. That's our encouragement for this week in Songs for Our Temple. I do hope you'll join us if it's not too late when you're watching this, online or in person live at 5:30 p.m. this Sunday. That's today. For worship, you can watch it on replay if you've missed it. And of course, tomorrow night we'll be continuing our series Foretold. We're doing Foretold F-O-U-R on Sunday night, looking at the four Gospels. Tomorrow night we'll pick up Foretold, F-O-R-E told, which is looking at the prophecies behind the Christmas story. And I hope you'll join me at 7 p.m. tomorrow, that's Monday night, for that as well. And then Friday night, Christmas Faith Tree. We're joining together with our friends at Bible Baptist, and Little Hills and Bible Baptist will be together celebrating the good news of Jesus Christ, looking at the sweeping story of God working his salvation throughout history and linking it to Christmas carols. If you love Christmas carols and just want to get to sing Christmas carols, come. If you know someone who doesn't normally come to church but loves Christmas carols, invite them to come. It's going to be a joyful, joyful night, 7 p.m. Friday night. I do hope that you'll join us for that as well. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful and blessed week, and I hope to see you again very soon.